All right, well, I'm gonna go ahead and introduce myself for anyone that hasn't met me yet. I am the National Sales Manager here at Styku out of our Los Angeles office. I'm going to be moderating this panel and the next panel. I feel very, very privileged to be a part on stage with these three individuals as well as the next three. They are some of the top individuals in the fitness industry, sports industry, and health industry. Our first panel is trends in fitness and health tracking. And I'm just gonna start and I'm gonna quickly introduce the three of them, and then I'm gonna have each of you kind of tell the audience a little bit about yourself, your story, and then we'll go into some questions, and then at the end we'll open it up for Q&A. All right, so I'm gonna start with Gary Vitti. I was able to meet him for the first time today, and I've heard a lot about him. My colleague Giselle says nothing but rave reviews. He is a legend. Points you got over there, okay? Yeah. He is a legend in the sports industry. He is currently a special advisor and consultant with the Los Angeles Lakers. For many, many years, he was the head athletic trainer for the Los Angeles Lakers. So he worked alongside Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, Magic Johnson, the infamous Kobe Bryant. And so hopefully he'll tell us a few stories maybe that we haven't been privileged to know before. Next we have Kat Barefield. She is the vice president of .Fit. She has an extensive nutrition background. She also is our lone female on the panel, so girl power.
3 drinks for her.
And I'm gonna let Kat go a little bit more into her extensive nutrition background as well. And then alongside my left, I have Mr. Jon Creekmore. I was privileged to meet Jon in Boston in December, and I sat down at dinner with him, and I quickly was like, this guy is way too smart for me, and I'm never gonna understand anything that he has to say.
I don't remember that. Dinner for me was...
But clearly, he is the Chief Technology and Security Officer, because he couldn't just have one title with Trainer MD. And I'm going to let Jon also go into a little bit more about his story, because I'll get it wrong even if I try. So, Gary, let's go ahead and start with you.
What are we starting with?
Tell us a little bit about yourself, your story.
You just did.
I know, well, okay, tell us like a story about Kobe Bryant.
Okay. She might be the only female on the panel, but I'm very in touch with my feminine side. Right? I was head athletic trainer with the Los Angeles Lakers for 32 years. I retired this past April, which, if anybody reads the sporting news, looks like a really, really good decision, huh? Since we've been imploding in front of everybody. Since my retirement, I started working in the technology end of professional sports, which is a little bit different than what you all are here for. Listening to Raj, you know, it quickly pops into my brain that a lot of you are involved with morbidity, okay? And you know, that's where Kat comes in with nutrition, and the Styku comes in with one of the evaluations to try to measure your progress. You know, that's not an issue for the population that I've been in. You know, I've worked with professional athletes more than half of my life who are in great condition, so morbidity is not an issue. So why am I up here with Styku? And is this okay that you?
Okay,
because I'll go off on 10. I'll be up here for
you
2
have 20
hours
minutes.
talking. So the way this whole thing started for me with 3D scanning was actually a laser scanner, $150,000 scanner, took up a lot of space, maybe about from here to the end of that platform. So that's a big piece of space that you have to have in your gym as compared to this thing. And the people that were manufacturing this were out of Germany, and they were using 3D scanning for ergonomics, for airplanes, cars, also the clothing industry. And it kind of came across our strength and conditioning coach's desk as some sort of measurements, anthropometric measurements, like, you know, stand and reach and things like that. People think wingspan is really important in basketball. It is, but what's more important is stand and reach, because wingspan takes into consideration your torso, okay? And, you know, some people have a big torso, some have, you know, like if you follow us, Brandon Ingram, I mean, he's a string bean, and he has almost a 9-foot wingspan, and that's all arms, okay? Very little torso. So we started thinking in these kinds of terms about, you know, how can we more easily measure our people as opposed to standing up against the wall with a ruler, you know, or a tape measure. And then my background, and it's interesting, Kat and I were just talking about, we have a mutual friend, Mike Clark, who's created the Fusionetics platform that probably a lot of you know about. And Mike bases a lot of his platform on Vladimir Janda. Okay? And those of you who don't know who that is, you really should look him up. He was a physician, Austrian. He had polio, and as a result, he started studying the human body. And this is about maybe early to mid-'80s. And what he realized that instead of there just being primary movers and secondary movers, there were also stabilizing groups. And Mike Clark has taken that, and Nathan mentioned doing a functional movement screening. He's created something similar. Okay? And so I keep pushing Giselle into having some sort of 3D scanning as we're moving through space. But before we can get there, we're trying to figure this part out. And so going back to the Janda Mike Clark thing, he basically breaks it down into 3 postural distortion patterns. And you know what they are. It's upper cross syndrome, lower cross syndrome, and pronation distortion syndrome. And that people that do repetitive motion, something you do over and over and over again, creates a compensation, and the compensation will create a dysfunction. And what we're seeing now, that could be in sports. It could be swinging a baseball bat, a tennis racket 1,000 times, taking 1,000 basketball shots, or it could be sitting in front of your computer all day longer and commuting in a car 2 hours each way, 4 hours a day. It might be micro motion, but it's repetitive motion. And so you see people that are in front of their computers where their shoulders begin to round and their head moves forward, and that would be an example of an upper cross syndrome. So I started looking at the 3D scanning and saying, okay, maybe we can measure these postural distortion syndromes 3-dimensionally, as opposed to, you use FMS and SFMA, Nathan, which is what most people do for screening, or Fusionetics. There are these different functional movement screening platforms. But what if we had something that was totally 100% objective? There's no subjectiveness about it. If you do a functional movement screening, which is, you know, looked at as gold, and it is, there's still some subjectiveness into it, okay? You know, therapists will say, I want you to reach back, you know, to the inferior angle of your scapula, and then he kind of looks at you, and then, you know, he writes something down, okay? And it's the same thing with the Fusionetics platform, and usually those are just yes/no answers. Were they able to do this? Were they able to do that? Squat 3 times, hold the last one. Then they look at you. Okay, what did you have to do to get into that position? Did your feet have to turn out? Did your knees go in? Did your knees go out? Did you have to bend over? And you look at these postural distortions, but once again, they're subjective. There's somebody evaluating it. And so we weren't getting anywhere with the laser scanners because it wasn't really their business. They just thought it was cool to be in the Laker locker room, you know, which a lot of people think is cool. But then Giselle, she found me. She read an article about one of the technologies that I was using, and I said, well, come on by, you know. And so she came by, and all of a sudden, this little thing looked so much easier, and they had already built a platform where these other people, we were trying to create a software with them, and they were spending some time on it, but I was getting frustrated with them. And so I kind of jumped on board with Styku. And I sort of look at things differently, I think, than a lot of people. For instance, the stand and reach as opposed to the wingspan. What about height? So since the beginning of time in basketball, we measure height from the ground, the bottom of your foot, to the top of your head. But really functionally, okay, so when we're not talking about personal fitness, but when we're talking about performance, we're always talking about functional movement. How much functional from the top of your shoulder to the top of your head, there's really not a lot of basketball function there, okay? Maybe if you're in the backcourt and you're a tall point guard, which isn't really around in the NBA anymore. The game has changed. It's a point guard dominated game. These guys are little and fast, okay? There's no more 6'9" point guards like Magic Johnson. So other than that, being able to look over somebody, there's really not much function from the top of your shoulder. So all this time, I think we've been looking at height the wrong way for basketball. So I'm sitting on the sideline one day with our general manager, Mitch Kupchak, and I'm looking at Luol Deng, and I can't remember the other kid's name. He played at UCLA. And Deng has no neck. His head just sits on his shoulders, okay? And the other kid got a big neck, okay? And I said, look at those two, okay? You know, there's something really different about that. So then I called Giselle, and I said, I think we're measuring people the wrong way. Maybe we should measure them from their AC joint down to the bottom of their foot on that side, and then maybe from their AC joint to the bottom, say, mid-navicular on their foot, and start looking at these measurements. And so for me, that's where my connection with Styku has. So it's different than morbidity. I'm not looking at fat people, okay? They're already leaned out. You know, and we have other ways of looking at body composition, because all these body comp things, unless we kill you and dissect you and measure all your fat, everything is really a prediction. It's all based on multiple regression, okay, and algorithms. So they throw these equations together. And so for me here, that's why I'm connected. So it's not from a morbidity standpoint, but it's for a postural evaluation standpoint, and how can we do correction? Because when I get an athlete, I've worked with basketball the last 33 years. I did a lot of professional tennis in the 80s too, with McEnroe and Jimmy Connors and those guys, but predominantly basketball. What's happening now, when I was a kid, and I'm going to wrap this up in a second. When I was a kid, we played football, baseball, and basketball. We did it. We cross-trained by virtue of that. The term didn't exist. We didn't know we were cross-training, but we were by playing different sports. That doesn't exist anymore. I'm sure people here have children. If your child's an athlete and they find out he has a propensity for a certain sport, that's it. He quits all the other ones, and they stick him in that sport. Somewhere around 7 to 9 years old is when he gets identified, and that's what he plays. And so he's doing the same thing over and over and over again. Now you fast forward to 19, because that's when they're coming in the NBA. Right. I actually had the two youngest players ever to be drafted, which were Kobe Bryant and Andrew Bynum, at 17, but they changed the rule. So I get them at 19. That means they were doing almost a decade of redundant movement, right, and they walk into my training room with all sorts of issues. So as fast as the game is today, all right, let's go back a sec. Is this being recorded?
Yes, yes.
All right, I'm gonna try to do this without getting in trouble. Okay. So here's the way I see the NBA today. I see three types of players. I see the European players that are really fundamentally sound, very skilled players, not very athletic, and I'm not going to say they're soft, but we'll call them finesse players. They don't like to bang around, okay?
So soft.
And then, yeah, okay, and then you have the South American players, primarily the Argentinians, but also some Brazilians, who are equally as skilled fundamentally as the Euros. Not very athletic. There are some exceptions to the rule, but not very athletic like the Euros, but they do like to bang, especially the Argentinian guys. They just love to beat the crap out of you in a game, okay? And then you have the American players, who have absolutely no fundamental skills at all because they rely on their athleticism. They never had to learn skills. They just ran by you and jumped over you, and they do like to beat you up, okay? And that's the way I see it. So where is all this athleticism coming from that when I broke in the league, before I worked for the Jazz, I was a Division I athletic trainer, and I also did 2 years with the Utah Jazz. And so I came in around 1979 into this business, it was before you were born, okay? And, you know, Magic Johnson and Larry Bird were drafted that year, okay? And I was in graduate school at the University of Utah, and that's where they played the national championship, Michigan State against Indiana State. I'm just telling you that because it's coincidental. But the fact is that Larry Bird and Magic Johnson, you could argue, are on the Mount Rushmore of basketball, two of the greatest players of all time. Couldn't jump over a piece of paper, okay? I mean, they weren't very athletic, not like these guys. So where's this, they were big, you know, and they were skilled. It's all coming from, it's all about your hips. It's all coming from their hips. And so this redundant movement that we see all the time is creating this anterior tilt, okay, this lower cross syndrome. And sometimes one side's tighter than the other, so now we got an upslip. And so people that are coming in and complaining about a hamstring strain or a groin strain, it's not. It's their posture. And so, you know, we start with corrective exercise. And once again, with the Styku, I thought that we could get a 3D scan and put markers on them and actually see how many millimeters of tilt are we talking about, okay? Anterior tilt and upslip. Okay. And so, you know, we start with myofascial release, and then we follow with stretching, and then we follow that with activation. And if we're talking about, you know, releasing their hip flexors, we know if you have really tight if you're really athletic, you're really going to have tight hip flexors. It's just a natural. We also know that if you have really tight hip flexors, because of reciprocal innervation, it's going to shut the neural drive off to your glute. So now we got to get your pelvis back into neutral, which will make you feel better, but we're not really there yet. Now we have to reactivate your glute. So we do all this, okay? First we do the evaluation, then we do the corrective exercise. Now we have you in a neutral posture so that we can begin your performance training. That's just to get to a starting point, okay? Now there's this thing about breaking through the wall that, you know, you had to be tough and push through, push, you know. That's out the window, and I'll tell you why. We call it core strength, okay, but it's core endurance, isn't it? So we can get you into, I found myself doing it. I was sitting there, and I kept slumping, and okay, I should do this in games, right? Because, you know, you sit there. You know, you play soccer, 90 minutes of soccer, 2 hours, man. You can set your watch to it. Basketball games, like 48 minutes. It takes us like 3 hours to play a basketball game. So it's hard to sit in that chair for, you know, watching a game. And so you end up doing this, and you catch yourself, and then you correct your posture, and then eventually, because it's core endurance, isn't it? It's not core strength. Strength is how much force can you generate. Power, how quickly can you generate it. Endurance, how long can you hold that force. Okay. So now we got them in the correct posture. Now we start our performance training, or actually playing basketball. And then when they fatigue, what's going to happen? They're going to go back into their default position. That's when you stop your training. Because if you don't, you're basically training them in their default position, making it that much harder to get out of it. Okay? So it's not breaking through the wall, it's moving the wall, okay? So you bring them up to that fatigue point, you stop, you let them recover, okay? Then you work on more endurance. So you keep moving the wall so they could hold their posture longer, okay? Does that make sense? So I don't know how I ended up over here, because I think you just
Raj,
asked me who I was.
next time can Gary have his
right.
own panel?
You want me to keep
No,
going?
no.
You better go to somebody else, so they're never going to get a chance.
No, Gary, we really appreciate
Okay.
you on here. And we're really glad you're on this panel because we want a different perspective. And that's very important with body scanning because it is, obviously it is about tracking progress, but we want to see it in all different facets. So thank you very much for that. Kat, I'm going to let you go into basically just a little bit about yourself, your story, and how you got to be with .fit.
Okay, thank you. Hi, everyone. I've been in the industry, fitness industry that is, for 20 years. My educational background is in athletic training and sports nutrition. I'm also a registered dietitian. My main career focus has been on how to integrate all the factors that drive results within the fitness industry into one place. And so I was part of the team that brought the first wearable device to the market, Bodybug. And so we brought that to the market. Obviously, it's non-existent anymore. It's not non-existent virtually. And then I also helped founded .fit as an evolution of wearables and integrating nutrition into the gym industry. So I am now interested in Styku because I'm the director of the Transformation Challenge at UFC Gym in 16 corporate clubs, over 2,200 people at our first launch. And I want to know how I can capture meaningful results across this 12-week challenge and do it with high volume amount of people, so with hundreds of people at a time. Because when you're running a challenge with thousands of people, they don't want to just know about their weight, and they end up dropping out if the scale isn't moving, to your point, Raj, which you were making earlier. So not just wearables, but also nutrition programming, which products drive results, maybe some behavioral science, and then also technology such as Styku to integrate into the fitness industry so that we can get away from one-dimensional programming and create more comprehensive programs for people who join our gyms. So that's sort of what I'm trying to work on.
Perfect. Thanks, Kat. John?
For sake of time, I'll keep it short. So I'm the CTO for Trainer MD and the Chief Information Security Officer too. My background is everything from special ops to weapons of mass destruction to cybersecurity for Cybercom, the NSA. And a bunch of other stuff. So the fitness industry is the back nine right now. I actually sold myself Styku. Did we have any negotiations? Right? I said, hey, I see your data and your capabilities and I want to weaponize it.
No, we had negotiations.
Was there negotiations?
Yeah, there were some negotiations.
They did come to Boston, as you heard the story. You're not off the hook. I want to take this to DEF CON to Vegas this year, as body scanning is the next privacy over security topic at Black Hat. We'll talk about that later. Right? Yeah, no, don't. We'll get the NDA. But no, honestly, so what we're doing is I didn't come onto the mission until late in Trainer MD. It's about bridging the gap between health and fitness. And so my CEO went through a long journey where he had an imbalance and injury from sports, from hockey, went to all the greatest medical people in Boston and, New England, Region 1 and all that good stuff and, state-of-the-art technology and all that crap, which is useless unless it's communicating and in the hands of the right team of support, right? So it took a master trainer off a whim at the very end of his line to actually get him up and back in his life, moving around and get his health back. The guy was like, you're not eating right, you have an imbalance, nobody could see these things. But nobody would listen to this person either because this person wasn't in healthcare. There's a huge compliancy. Arnold Schwarzenegger can't even rip the red tape today between fitness and health. So we'll see what's going on this week with URSA. And body scanning is coming on the map really quick. So I said, hey, there's a lot of data points in this. And in our program, we kind of created like the credit score, like FICO score of health, right? So you log into the dashboard, you could have 3 million people in your organization, your team, it's gamified. You could see hundreds of points of their data down to the micronutrients every minute of the day that they're eating with VitaBot. And then it'll actually let your doctor or your trainer know if you slide on a cheeseburger. It plugs into a bunch of cool stuff like Chipotle's menu and all that. So we figured out what it was two things, information and communication. Okay, this industry's finally getting there. Raj is bringing to fitness a lot of cool stuff like the healthcare industry had 30 years ago, portable x-ray machines and all this fancy whiz-bangs. But don't worry about it. It's so complicated that you have to have a technician that you pay $15 an hour per square foot to come in here, but it'll totally change what you can do for your patients to help their life, right? And it's the same thing right now with all the technology that we're having in fitness. So you have all the wearables. They collect data. Data is useless unless you knowledge management transformationalize this into information that's actionable intelligence, right? I think we have a CIO or something in the room. So you know all about this process, right? You get yelled at, like, what is this doing to drive my facility? Both bettering the players, for example, in performance athletics. Our 7 years and thousands of pilots, we had extreme athletes, we got master trainers with athletics involved. We have advisors that are physicians, chief cardiologists and stuff that are involved, dietitians, physical therapists. And it's literally like, hey, where do you feel the gap is happening? And so we took this over years and we figured out it's on-site and online. So we decided to create this kind of hybrid model where we could do it in our own facilities where you come through a round robin in like 30 minutes, you get 60 pages of actionable intelligence on you. So think about the healthcare checkup, the Monarchy of Health, right? We were able to get Styku up and running in our cloud in like 7 days, 6 days. It's not super hard, and Raj is about to roll that out pretty soon here as a big thing. But we were able to get it into our HIPAA compliant platform so your doctor can see your body scan in live time. If my fat goes up, I want to know by text message compliantly. I can get that as soon as I get scanned, whether it's in LA, Hong Kong, wherever. So it's really cool. It's about the third wave. So that's really what we figured out is that, you know, healthcare is starting to go this way, fitness is kind of going this way, and there's a big rift in the middle, which is like the government, honestly, everywhere you go, whether it's Australia, whether it's Canada, data privacy protection in Europe. And so surprisingly enough, that's why I kind of got brought onto the team. And within like not too long, the first thing I did as a CTO was say, hey, body scanning. And I hunted out quite a few folks. And we settled with Styku for our initial run through. They came out to Boston. We met Alicia and met Raj. They did a ribbon cutting with some of our partners. And it was really cool to actually see the harmonization in person. We had senior leaders from Jobber that now all their wearables go live into our dashboard. So if you go running, your trainer, your doctor, anybody gets that right, like you can see your heartbeat, like real time. Your nutrition, cheeseburgers, VitaBot, and then Styku is now, they're just destroying half of our data set, which is outstanding. Because I can see what the average right torso measurement is for 3,000 people in my company's workplace wellness program, my fitness chain, stuff like that. So I'm all, you know, I joke around about building the NSA of health and fitness, and whoever, the 360 room that you set up, we have something like that in our facility, but imagine a lot more an 85-inch smart board that looks at like 60 pages of your data and widgets, and you can play cool NSA and dissect your people. But it's consumer driven, and that's one of the cool things that we're doing. So people are loving it, though. Our chief medical officer is like over the moon about what this is going to do. And he told me, he said, John, if you could get the behavioral data around that body scan, it's just data. But if I could see what they're doing in their life, I could see what they're eating, what they're exercising, what their goals are, I could build a much better picture of this person to actually help them as a medical officer. I only have 5 minutes a year with my 2,500 patients. And there's a story to be told, and nutrition's 80% of it, basically. Body scanning alone is just revolutionary. We have doctors that are just like jumping up and down, like, I heard they got scanned today. Can I see their data? Like, yeah, that's why we put it in the cloud. You can see their data now, doc. So it's just really cool, and I'm glad to make the journey, and I thank both of you for allowing us to be here today.
Thanks for being here, and thank you for that, John. Kat, I'm going to get started with you. Can you explain a little bit more to the audience the .fit platform and the membership experience that you currently have right now?
So I'm going to go to your point as a segue of nutrition being 80% of the result. I'm going to argue that at times, for a majority of members, it's 100%. Because you can work out and work out and work out, right? But if you don't nourish your body the proper way, then your body composition doesn't change. You might get in better shape, your heart rate might drop, gain more muscle, et cetera. But essentially, if you're not feeding your body properly, your body does not change. So as a registered dietitian and as part of the team that I am on, we have created a software platform where we can individually assess someone's calorie expenditure based on algorithms, right? And then attach a device to it if they so choose to, such as a Fitbit. And then allow trainers to then deliver a comprehensive recommendation to their members that integrates a nutrition plan with menus, with even a dietary supplement recommendation, which takes into account their medical history, and then also a software that integrates Dr. Mike Clark's information, his OPT model, and his Fusionetics platform. So it integrates everything essentially in one spot so that trainers can then deliver nutrition within their scope of practice.
Awesome, thank you. Gary, I have a question for you. So over the 32 years as head athletic trainer, What have you seen that's changed in tracking nutrition and assessment, and what hasn't changed at all?
Probably the two big things that have changed in tracking, okay? The biohackers are putting a lot of emphasis on measuring sugar, okay? Which is our number one. We have 5 basic tenets of our nutrition program that we call Pro Nutrition. P for performance, R for recovery, and O for orthogenesis, okay? Nourishing, articulating cartilage in your joints through things like bone broth and stuff like that, okay? So the trackers would be measuring sugar and let me give you the 5 tenets. So number 1, reduce sugar, okay? Eliminate it if you can. Number 2, eliminate all toxic oils, that even ones that aren't trans fat until they get heated up. Some people don't know that, okay? Number 3, 2/3 of your plate should be colorful. Number 4, carbohydrates in moderation. And number 5, food sourcing, okay? Where does the food come from? So with the Lakers, all of our catering, whether it's at the practice site, the airplane, hotels, Staples Center, everything comes from Whole Foods, okay? And we don't have any dairy that doesn't come from a pasture-raised cow. So all it's eaten is mother's milk and grass. You mainly raise pork, free-range chicken, that kind of thing.
And what's the reason behind it all coming from Whole Foods? Organic? How they...
Well, what we're trying to do is eliminate anything that's corn-fed.
Okay.
Because corn has been genetically modified. And so you could put a cow in a cornfield, it's not going to eat corn. Okay? But if you put it in a pen and force it to eat corn, then it's going to eat corn. And so, we're looking for the maximum nutrient that can come out of that food source. Okay? And we believe that the way to get that is you have to feed the animal the right thing so that what you're eating is the right thing. So those are the 5 basic tenets. So back to the question about tracking is because we're eliminating sugar and we have carbs in moderation, then where is our energy coming from? And what we're trying to do is become ketolic, okay, so that our players are burning fat as an energy source as opposed to carbohydrates and proteins. There's a lot of research out there right now that's showing the assumptions that we made about anaerobic exercise and aerobic exercise were just flat out wrong. And the game of basketball is played on the anaerobic-aerobic threshold. So when we see guys that are consuming a lot of carbs or carb drinks, okay, whether it's food or liquid, we're getting this yo-yo effect from them. So they consume the carbs, they have all this energy, and then they crash, and then they got to reload, and they crash, and that's why you see them drinking these crazy drinks on the sideline, gel packs and all this other stuff, where if you feed somebody a higher fat diet and a lower sugar and carb diet, then they're going to use fat and you're going to get this kind of a burn. It's not going to be here, it's not going to be here, it's going to be here, and it's not going to do this. And so there is a way to measure fat burn, okay? So back in the early 80s when I first broke in, I used to do VO2 maxes on all of our players during physical exam. I stopped doing it because they figured out that the cardiologist, it was a modified bulky procedure, that the cardiologist and the cardio nurses knew that they could get all the information that they needed with about 12 minutes on the treadmill. And the max I think that anybody went was something like 18.9 was AC Green, 18.6 was Michael Cooper, and I think I was like 18.2, okay? That was then, okay? That was a long time ago. So they were giving me half-ass efforts, and so as a result, I stopped doing it.
Okay.
But more recently, there's been some equipment that if you can get an athlete at the level that we're working with, okay, to put on the headgear and breathe into a ventilator, there's some equipment out there that'll suggest what they're using for an energy source. So those two things.
Perfect. Thank you. Good
I
answer.
could have just said sugar, yeah.
No, but we like to hear you talk. I have a question for all three of you, so whoever wants to jump in can jump in. If you were to take one thing off the market, whether it's a wearable, a piece of technology, a supplement, some type of nutrition, what would it be and why?
Sugar for what I just said.
Okay. Kat?
I think it changes every week, right? Depending on the market. I think the last thing I saw was just a device that you put around your waist, right? It's supposed to help you lose body fat or train your waist, a waist trainer, if you will, which there's no evidence to support it. So it changes every week, but that's probably one of the latest ones I can think of.
I see people running around LA with that
With a
thing
waist
on.
trainer.
Yeah, completely. It's very odd. I'm serious.
That's very.
Yeah. John?
The Food and Drug Administration. Can we get rid of that? Is that possible? Everything that you have that works does not have 30-year adoption rates yet for white papers for PhD people like me to read and then proof off on, right? Today, unintelligent wearable devices, we're creating so much data, not just about security. Like the NSA, the Director of National Security, Emma Rogers, talked this year at our big event, Cyber, here in Vegas, and was talking about basically national security in all nations right now at the UN level are concerned about all the data that we're creating because we're not using it. So if we were creating it and using it for some economic or some health and human service related need, right, like industries to do something with it intelligently, that'd be okay. But we have all these people collecting all this data, throwing it to some server, and then goes in the drawer, right? So you think about this is creating a lot of information about us over the time. And we're not very much regulating them because they run out and say, hey, we're consumer, we're hokey. This is more of a consumer novelty device than it is meant to be anything else. But you're creating a $4 billion dividend for your shareholders, and nobody's actually getting better. So yeah, I'd say pretty much any unintelligent wearable that doesn't have any program, expert behind
Anything
it.
specific?
No, not for recorded purposes. But
We'll sign an NDA.
If I tell you what, if you've seen someone like me at DEF CON talking about how I hacked your wearable to get into your smartphone, was that really worth counting your basal metabolic rate, honestly, that they have your nudes, your contacts, your bank card, over a wearable device, right? So yeah, I'm not going to name certain names, but go do your homework on Google, you'll figure out what I'm talking about.
I know what you're talking about.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, so
All
got
right.
a little personal there.
John, I'm going to direct a question towards you, and this has been a conversation I've had with you and Joe a lot, and I think a lot of people in the fitness industry would probably be very interested in this. So Trainer MD, as he had mentioned, is basically bridging the gap between health and fitness, and one of the largest barriers is HIPAA compliance. Yep. And John is getting his PhD currently on basically information technology and security, and he has a lot of knowledge in this arena. So could you go ahead and explain to the audience the importance of the HIPAA compliance and how it also could affect the fitness industry?
Yeah, absolutely. So we'll say here in America, Health and Human Services regulates that if you have private health information under HIPAA, which is the Health Insurance Portability and Accountability Act of 1996, of more than 500 people, and you have a breach, you now have to do what? Sorry. You have to notify everybody, and then you have to start paying for credit monitoring. And the average breach in America is $1.32 million, according to 2016 studies from HHS. So no matter how awesome your franchise is, it can't afford $1.3 million in liability damages, right? That's starting out. It's not to pay for the credit monitoring or anything else. So there's a lot of people. Good example, you're a consultant now, 30 years of subject matter expertise. You could truly fix human bodies, I imagine. You can't do that today, though. Compliance and governments will not allow you to actually sit there and work with a doctor for a health insurance paid or treated service, like under a health savings account for medical weight loss, diabetics. Number one things killing people in the world today are diabetes, cardiovascular disease, and things like that are preventable, actually, right? Nutrition, exercise. Hey, we actually are sitting on it. It's not just all fat people. These people don't mean to be this way. they don't have access to comprehensive and intelligent resources from providers. You can give them a novelty thing at the gym. You might find one-off trainers or dietitians that are really good at what they're doing and they're advocating, but you can't scale that up yet because you've got that huge compliance wall. Healthcare networks won't even talk to you, to be honest. You could be the largest fitness club chain in the world. We're not going to play HIPAA data information sharing yet. So what happens, though, which is really cool, is the channel for a third party, what we call a managed service provider, to come into birth is happening. So that's what our company is. We're a managed service provider of compliant information that's guided by experts. So 7 years of doctors, expert trainers, people that train the Red Sox, and all sorts of cool stuff have come on. So it's not just about fat people. I mean, we want performance and potential. We got guys that are using this for intelligence. So that's what we're doing, is we're providing intelligence that's compliant and secure. I'm not going to interpret any of this data. If your wearable brings me a heart rate or VO2 max, I'm just going to archive that, put it in the record, and make it accessible to all your experts. So the problem is, everybody wants Tom Brady's team, as we joke about up in Boston, right? Because that's where those guys are. Everybody, Tom Brady. You can't get Tom Brady's team, and it's not a matter of the lack of experts, it's compliance today. Tom Brady's team, you know, I mean, you work around major sports, dude. You know how much goes into business administration and management today, compliance, moving that data from doctors to hospitals, carrying records. You can't do that for everybody, right? It's impossible. And we're not asking to give Tom Brady's team, his exact team, to everyone. We're trying to create a world where it's bridged the gap, where you can be that subject matter expert in nutrition or athleticism to somebody in your local community, and you can actually work with the other side of the house, which is the healthcare spectrum, right there, whether it's in the park, whether it's in the fitness club, even in rural areas. We're working on projects where they just can't reach the people. They don't have gyms, they don't have doctors. But I might have a retired consultant over telemedicine and telehealth that can sit there and actually look at your data just from monthly screenings, functional movement, vitals testing, basic things. Styku is in our arsenal now. Getting monthly Styku, slap it on the back of a trailer like we're doing and ride it around, body scan them, and then have experts like you sit there behind the keys compliantly and help lots of folks. And they may not all be athletes, but I mean, honestly, we're losing millions. So yeah, that's the reason why everyone can't figure this out, because cybersecurity folks and compliance and IT, information communication technology, has not really come to the forefront of priorities for this entire industry, just like healthcare, for many decades. Now you're seeing the rise of CISOs and CIOs in industries like health and fitness, because that data about our consumer, its behavior, their knowledge, what they know, what they do, what they are, is absolutely going to give us the actionable intelligence to support our decision systems today, but they can't reach it. So they're making grasp at straws, they're buying this platform this week, they're tossing it next week, they're getting this wearable to every user, they're tossing it next week, you said week to week, and the problem's systemic. It's because at the end of the day, their ROI is completely destroyed because they can't scale that information and replicate what they can do for people. So,
Is there anything either of y'all want to add?
Just to piggyback on it, and this is the conversation that I had with Raj and Giselle when we first started talking about using this technology and, you know, getting the information on a particular player. We had to sit down and talk to them about who owns the information, who can see it, you know, is it encrypted, where is it stored, you know, and the hacking thing, you could, if you don't store it in the right place, somebody could hack into the entire Lakers system because through Styku. I mean, it's the whole thing is crazy. And to your other point about the vast amounts of data that these different technologies are creating, you know, and we can talk about this if anybody's interested. We have an eye in the sky in the arena that shoots 25 frames a second that identifies all 10 people on the court. And from that, I can extrapolate the average, how many accelerations, how many decelerations, the trajectory of them, the average speed, the distance that they ran, all this stuff, plus a whole ton more. And when you go up to the analytics, because I don't write code, right? I just know I got to go to the code people and say, this is what I want to know, okay? Because the two things the body doesn't like is eccentric load and torque. If you ran as fast as you could in a straight line and you could circumvent the globe and never get tired, you would never get hurt. As soon as you try to slow down, now you're in trouble. And if you try to slow down and turn, now you're in big trouble, okay? And if the loads going up the kinetic chain are not going to a link that can handle that load, then that's where it's going to fail. I don't know where it is, but that's what's going to happen, okay? So I'm constantly looking for these things, and I go up to the analytics department, and it's just numbers. It's vast amounts of numbers. And I don't know how they do it, but they find out what I'm looking for. At least they tell me they do. I don't know how accurate this stuff is. Okay. I'll stop there. If you want to talk about that technology and how we use it to derive load on a player and intensity for a contest, I'll keep going. Or if you want to go in that direction.
Well, I want to open it up to the audience right now to ask any more questions, so they might ask you that question. But I just want us to have enough time to give everyone a chance that has a question for any of these experts up here. Yes, Mark.
Do you guys use on intermittent fasting, whether it be for a normal person going to the gym or a professional athlete?
I'm sorry, can you say that again?
What do you use on
microphone?
Maybe, yeah.
Do we have a mic? Thanks, guys.
I'm sorry, you're behind the sound. When that works?
Hello.
I'll buy 'em
Just
for
wanted to know what your guys' takes was on intermittent fasting and with professional athletes or just a normal person going to the gym.
Fasting, that's
Yeah.
the question? Yeah, I'm totally against fasting. I think the body needs nourishment.
I would tend to agree, especially for professional athletes, against intermittent fasting.
Why is that?
The demand on the body that's required to perform at high levels, and if you're in a fasted state and you've compromised glycogen stores, then you can impair performance. I haven't looked at all of the research in the last 30 or 60 days. I don't know if there's something new that's out there, but I don't believe that any of the research shows that you get a significant difference in increases in performance with fasting versus in a loaded state.
And I would also say, in addition to what Kat said about burning glycogen or whatever energy source you're talking about, there's ATP generation and protein synthesis that needs to occur post-performance. So it's recovery, and you need those calories and the right kind of calories to rebuild, and fasting doesn't do that for you.
All right. Well, thank you all for being up here. Very knowledgeable. And we'll take a quick break.
You're good.
Thank you.